Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So a quick preview and prediction for Nordine Oubaali versus Nonito Donaire. First things first, to me, this is one of the more interesting fights of the year so far. And to tell you the truth, I find this fight extremely hard to call, mainly because obviously Nonito Donaire has not fought since November 2019 against Naoya Inoue. That was a tough loss to take. He took a lot of damage, and also on top of the inactivity, Nonito Donaire is 38 years old. So as good as he is, as good as he was, we're basically at the stage now where the wheels could fall off at any point, and that kind of makes this fight hard to call. And also, you know, in my opinion, that Nordine Oubaali is just a real good fighter. I think he's somewhat underrated. I think he's very dangerous. He's got a unique, interesting style, and it can be hard to deal with. So when you put these two guys together at this stage of their careers, I find this fight exceptionally hard to call. I would pick a prime Donaire in a heartbeat, but that version doesn't exist anymore. Against Inoue, he was proving to still be a good fighter, but is he the same since then? I don't really know. But all in all, it's a real good fight. Stylistically, it should be really entertaining. It could be one of those fights where you're on the edge of your seat, you know? Oubaali is very aggressive, and Donaire obviously is a master counterpuncher with huge power, so put these two guys together, stylistically I can't see this one being a bad fight, to tell you the truth. But let's get the tail of the tape out of the way. We shall start with the champion, Nordine Oubaali. He has a perfect record of 17-0 with 12 knockouts. Nonito Donaire has a record of 40 wins, 6 defeats, 26 of those 40 wins coming by way of knockout. Nordine Oubaali is listed as 5'3.5" with a 67-inch reach, whereas Nonito Donaire is listed as 5'7" with a 68.5-inch reach. So Donaire has a 3.5-inch height advantage and also a 1.5-inch reach advantage. So naturally Donaire is the much bigger man out of the two. He's actually been as high as featherweight in his career, and that size advantage could play a factor in this fight. It's certainly something that you need to be aware of, in my opinion, and it certainly needs to be considered. Nordine Oubaali is 34 years old, whereas Nonito Donaire is 38 ye's old. So Oubaali's no spring chicken, but he doesn't have a miles on the clock that Donaire has. He's had a lot less pro fights, and yeah, Oubaali's definitely the fresher guy out of the two. But on the flip side, Donaire has a lot more experience than Nordine Oubaali, and again, the youth, the experience are also factors that you need to consider. Nordine Oubaali is a southpaw, whereas Nonito Donaire is an orthodox fighter. But now the tail of the tape is out of the way, let's break down what I believe each guy should do, and eventually who I believe is going to win this fight. I think we'll start with Donaire, the challenger in this fight. Obviously, historically, Donaire has been viewed as a one-punch knockout artist and a master counterpuncher. That's essentially his style. He's got great timing, and when he times you, he's got the habit of making it count, either with the left hook or the right hand. And in this fight, those counterpunches are going to be vital for his chances of success. His timing needs to be on point, and he needs to walk Oubaali into that left hook or the overhand right. And I think Oubaali, due to his style, is a guy who's open for these big counters. I've heard people describe Oubaali as a boxer type, when in reality he doesn't have that style. Oubaali's style to me is more so of an aggressive fighter, like an aggressive ambush fighter. That's how I would describe Oubaali's style. And he's got a few tells in his game that, in my opinion, an experienced guy like Donaire should be able to pick up on and maybe land those big counter shots. So Oubaali's got a habit where he'll like to stay on the outside with bouncing his feet, and then he'll come flying in with an attack. He's not one of those guys who likes to jab his way in. He can do it, don't get me wrong. He can apply pressure that way, but primarily he's a guy who likes to sit on the outside, bounce, 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 and then jump in, and then do his attack. Problem with that, due to the bounce in his feet, he actually gives a tell of when he's going to attack a lot of the time. So what I've noticed with Oubaali is when he's fighting, when he's on the outside, when he's bouncing, he'll bounce, 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 dip, and then jump in. He'll dip at his knees, then he'll jump in. To me, that's a big tell for a counterpuncher like Nonito Donaire. Essentially, he needs to be aware of when Oubaali takes that dip, he needs to be ready with the left hook and that short chopping right hand, especially that right hand, because Oubaali's a southpaw, and when he comes in, he's very open to that shot. Of course, Donaire is famous for his left hook, arguably his best punch, but his short right hand counter is actually very effective. It's a real good shot, and I think that shot in this fight could be very effective at timing Oubaali coming in. Bear in mind that Oubaali's a guy who likes to, he kind of has his guard quite low, doesn't always protect his chin when he comes in, and again, to me he looks open for these counter shots if Donaire can get his timing down. So Donaire needs to be aware of that dip, and then try and counter from there as Oubaali comes in. Don't get me wrong, sometimes Oubaali will throw that dip as a feint kind of thing, but a lot of the time he'll attack off that dip, so he needs to be aware of it when Oubaali drops those knees a little bit kind of thing. Another thing with Oubaali's bounce, sometimes you'll see a fighter excessively use bouncing in his footwork. To me, a lot of elite fighters can actually read that bounce, get the rhythm, and then utilise that when to throw the jab. I want to see Donaire be a lot more active with that lead hand in this fight. Sometimes Donaire is guilty of looking for one perfect shot all the time, looking for one perfect counter, and as a result, that can lead to you being outworked in rounds and losing rounds. I think Donaire is guilty of that at times. Although having said that, he's actually got better at using that lead hand a bit more since he's gone back down to bantamweight. But when Oubaali bounces, I'll be trying to time that bounce of when to throw the jab. So when Oubaali is up in the air on that bounce, throw the jab, because it's much harder to throw a shot back when you're on the top of that bounce, if that makes sense. You can actually time the bounce in a fighter's step if you're good enough. So in this fight, I want to see Donaire also utilise that jab a lot more and try and point score, because Oubaali's a very busy, he's not a super busy fighter, but he's one of those guys who fights in spurts, he'll get his work done, and he can win rounds based on that. So Donaire needs to try and avoid being outworked in numerous rounds. He can't afford just to rely on knocking out Oubaali. He needs to be utilising that jab, trying to time that bounce, and also just trying to make the most of your height and reach advantage. Try and keep Oubaali at arm's length behind a hard jab, you know. Keep him on the outside, keep him behind that hard jab, and make him want to jump in. Make Oubaali frustrated so he's willing to jump in and maybe walk into a big counter. But in this fight, you know, Donaire needs to, when Oubaali's on the outside, I think he needs to utilise that jab, because Oubaali's not great on the outside. He's not a guy who likes to jab with you or you know, fight you at arm's length. His whole MO is getting to mid-range, getting to the inside, doing his thing, and then getting out. And at that point, if Oubaali doesn't sense that you have anything for him, that's when he gets more aggressive. That's when he'll spend more time in the pocket trading and really trying to work you over. So I think Donaire's jab in this fight needs to be a lot more prominent than we've seen in a lot of fights. And ultimately, Donaire needs to do what Donaire does. He needs to be that master counterpuncher. He needs to walk Oubaali onto something massive, in my opinion. I'm not sure whether Donaire can win this fight on points. Bear in mind, Oubaali is a PBC fighter. This is a PBC show. So I'm not sure whether Donaire at this stage can comprehensively outpoint Oubaali, comprehensively outwork him. So yeah, I think he needs to try and utilise that counterpunch ability, walk him into a big shot kind of thing, and win this fight by knockout. But as for Nordine Oubaali, the champion, to me in this fight, obviously he needs to utilise the fact that he's younger, he's fresher, he's got a better work rate, and ultimately I think he needs to utilise his current style, but he needs to be a lot more tight with it. So I was mentioning earlier, at times Oubaali tends to hold his guard a little low, and obviously against a guy like Donaire, when you're coming in, that's a big risk. So in this fight, Oubaali defensively needs to tighten that guard up a lot more, hold it a bit higher, try and protect that chin, come in low. You know, he needs to try and evade those power shots, those big counters. And when he's on the inside, I actually think it would benefit Oubaali to try and stay on the inside. Don't actually exit the pocket. Try and stay in that wheelhouse, get on Donaire's chest, and really work. Donaire, listen, Donaire can punch on the inside, he can fight on the inside a bit, but that's really not his strong point. Oubaali's much more relentless on the inside. He's great at shortening his shots, you know, putting his head in the good position, and really kind of working you over to body and head. I think it's beneficial for Oubaali to try and spend as long as possible on the inside in this fight. Keep those sequences on the inside for as long as possible, because I think you can smother Donaire's power when you're really on his chest kind of thing. So the key for Oubaali is obviously closing that distance like he usually does, but in a much more defensively sound manner. You know, a lot of the times he'll come forwards and he'll close the distance with while he's dropping his hands. Can't afford to do that in this fight. Can't even afford to have a lax guard. He needs to come in low, compact, behind a nice tight guard, close the distance quickly, and then work on the inside. You know, Oubaali does have very quick feet. He cuts the distance extremely quickly. And, you know, Donaire doesn't have the quickest feet in the world, so he can definitely close the gap in this fight. It's just when he does, he needs to be careful doing it, and when he gets to the inside, he needs to stay there as long as possible. Obviously, when you're fighting a guy like Donaire, who's a big puncher, who's got really good timing, it's natural to be quite cautious, more cautious than you'd usually be. And I'm not sure that favours Oubaali in this fight. He needs to bring that same aggressive style. It doesn't suit Oubaali to sit on the outside for long periods of time and just wait. No, he can't afford to let Donaire get comfortable in this fight. He can't afford to let Donaire build a bridgehead in this fight, because at that point, you know, who knows what could happen. Maybe Oubaali walks into a big shot, maybe he gets careless. He needs to keep the pressure on Donaire in this fight, stay in the pocket as long as possible, stay on his chest as long as possible, make it a rough, tough fight, and basically go about business that way. One thing about Oubaali, he actually defends himself quite decently on the inside. Again, not like an Andre Ward or a Bernard Hopkins, but he does a pretty good job of protecting himself on the inside, where he's more protected than you are, and he's doing his thing on the inside. So, yeah, the key for me in this fight is Oubaali just being on the inside as much as possible. Avoid a boxing match with Donaire. Don't play that tip-tap stuff, because you could walk into a big shot, Donaire could time you. I just don't think Oubaali can afford to show Donaire that sort of respect. He needs to be him, he needs to be aggressive, and he needs to make Donaire feel like the old man that he is. Let's be honest about it. He needs to make Donaire feel 38 years old. Get on the inside, work. And yeah, that's it. He needs to be aggressive in this fight, but in a smart fashion. Again, the biggest factor for him is getting to the inside. That's going to be the minefield. He needs to dodge those mines, dodge those counter punches, and do his thing basically. But all in all, you know, I find this fight really hard to call, to tell you the truth. Obviously, if we was talking a prime Donaire, I would pick Donaire to win. Even the Donaire from the Inoue fight, I might favour him, to tell you the truth. But the reality is, I'm not sure whether that Donaire still exists. You know, for all we know, he's got old overnight and now he's completely shot. It could be a possibility, so that makes this fight extremely hard to call for me. But you know, at the end of the day, you guys want a prediction, and even now I'm second guessing myself, to tell you the truth. I wasn't even going to do a prediction for this fight because I just can't split these guys. But I will take a stab in the dark, and my official prediction is Nordine Oubaali on points. Ultimately, I'm just thinking he might be a bit too busy for Donaire, a bit too fresh, a bit too young, and I think more than likely he's got a bit more in the tank. So my official prediction is Oubaali on points, but at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if this guy gets knocked clean out. It is what it is. It's one of those sort of fights. I am rooting for Donaire, I have to tell you the truth. Nothing against Oubaali, he's a good fighter, but you know, I would love to be wrong. I'd love Donaire to win this fight by knockout, but my official pick is Oubaali on points. Anyway, share your thoughts below. Who do you guys pick to win this fight? The older man in Donaire or Nordine Oubaali, the current champion? Share your thoughts below. Peace.